In the meantime, the South Africa's Reserve Bank has outlined three major risks to the financial system stability in the first edition of a twice-yearly review report, which was released on Thursday. The central bank listed cybersecurity, low economic growth, and climate change as some of the main threats to the Africa's most advanced financial system. Here, excerpt from the Stability Report presentation.
A lot happened since the release of our previous FSR published in November last year. The Financial Stability Review is a document mandated by the Financial Sector Regulations Act, which requires the South African Reserve Bank to assess and communicate the stability of the South African financial system. We do this twice a year. Globally, we are witnessing a significant disruption of the international trade system. We are also seeing intensifying global conflicts, with the war in Ukraine ongoing and conflict escalating in the Middle East. So far, South Africa's financial system is demonstrating a high degree of resilience in response to these and other global shocks. Nonetheless, there are risks which we discuss in the Financial Stability Review. We also identify certain ongoing structural risks, such as South Africa's low and inequitable economic growth, the implications of climate change for the financial sector, and the ever-present risk of cyber attacks disrupting the financial system. We also discuss new work on some of the tools and measures we use to study and protect financial stability. These include a revised methodology for calculating the credit to GDP gap, which is an important measure of identifying excess credit growth. It should be noted that we don't see an overheating of credit currently. However, our ability to monitor it is now further advanced. We also showcase a new and improved Financial Conditions Index, which was first published in the November 2024 FSR and complements the credit to GDP gap. It also forms part of the suite of macroprudential indicators the South African Reserve Bank uses to monitor financial stability conditions. We have also been working on adjusting the counter-cyclical capital buffer to a neutral level of 1%, which would give us space to adjust it both down and up as the cycle requires. The first FSR references a series of studies we have done on this particular subject using econometric models. Relevant papers on this topic have been published on our website. Broadly, this research suggests the move up to 1% will have a modest and temporary impact on credit extension. This is low cost relative to the longer run benefits. Finally, climate change will be an abiding challenge with which impacts that include risks to financial stability. Last year, we conducted a first climate risk stress test to evaluate the resilience of systemically important banks to climate-related shocks. The FSR provides an overview of the lessons learned from the test. We have also published a standalone technical report on climate risk stress test on our website. Before I conclude, I would like to mention the Sarb's Financial Stability Research Symposium, which takes place next week. The symposium is based on our financial stability research agenda, which supports practical, evidence-based macroprudential policy making. The theme for this year is maintaining financial stability amid global volatility and uncertainty. Just like the many conferences we had been attending around the world, every conference that we attend has got the word uncertainty in them. Whether it's about monetary policy or about growth prospects, it has got the word uncertainty in it, which then says to us, the one thing that is certain is that uncertainty is here with us.
The contents of my presentation is really quite simple. I'll do a brief introduction of why and how the Reserve Bank assesses financial stability, then look at the key risks and vulnerabilities, the policy actions and initiatives that are undertaken to mitigate risks, and I'll end off with a brief financial stability assessment. And global uncertainty typically leads to a flight to safety, and this is evidenced currently by the very high gold price. And generally, uncertainty is also associated with capital outflows from emerging markets. Previous editions of the FSR have elaborated on the impact of a deterioration in critical infrastructure, such as roads, railways, water and electricity on the financial system. There are no short-term remedies for these, but initiatives like Operation Volundlela and a review of the municipal funding model are promising longer-term mitigants. The figure on the left shows, just as an example, how Transnet tonnages have decreased from about 226 million tons in 2017 to a low of 150 million in 2022, just recovering slightly in later years. The government roadmap for allowing private train operating companies to access the national rail network should provide support for the growth targets of 2025 and 2026. And then on the right, after a reprieve in the latter half of last year, moderate levels of load shedding resumed in the first few months of the year. However, they have not been as severe as in the past, and the availability of renewable energy generation continues to grow. The Financial Sector Contingency Forum, or FSCF, which is chaired by the Reserve Bank with membership across the financial sector, continued with the implementation of a project to connect key nodes in the financial system, and that's basically in the payment, clearing and settlement system, through alternate connectivity lines, and this is to be able to continue providing critical financial services in the event of a prolonged loss of connectivity for whichever reason. South Africa has recorded 2 consecutive primary budget surpluses over the past 2 fiscal years. However, the latest budget review projects South Africa's debt to GDP ratio to peak at 77.4%, and this is higher than the peak of 70.5% that was projected at the time of the medium-term budget policy statement. And the borrowing requirement and debt services cost are also projected to remain high. The financial sector has a significant exposure to government bonds, making it vulnerable potentially to valuation changes in the event of a shock to bond yields. As a mitigant, the Prudential Authority surveys the mark-to-market and hedging activities and practices of banks to detect early enough an excessive build-up of unrealized losses on individual banks' balance sheets. Bank data on non-performing loans continue to indicate financial strain, in particular among households and small and medium enterprises. For all categories of loans, the ratio of non-performing loans to total loans, or the purple lines, are above their long-term trends. The long-term trend is the horizontal dotted lines. However, as you can see on the green lines, the growth in non-performing loans seem to be subsiding, and lower interest rates should also provide some relief. An important mitigating factor insofar as the safety of banks is concerned is that banks make prudent provisions against non-performing loans as they occur. This edition of the FSR contains a write-up about the Sarb's monitoring framework for assessing climate-related risks to financial stability. Among other trends, it highlights the issue of the climate insurance protection gap, which is the uninsured portion of economic losses that arise from climate-related shocks. Related to this is the growing list of uninsurable risks. Those are the risks that insurance companies explicitly exclude from their cover. The Reserve Bank conducted its first ever climate-related stress test on the 6 systemically important banks, and the scenarios and the results of this groundbreaking exercise are summarized in the FSR. The technical detail is available in a paper published on our website. In this respect, given the very long timeline of the scenarios up to 2050, the benefit of the exercise was not only in the results for each bank, but also in the insights gained about the divergent ability of banks to assess climate risk, the data gaps that have to be closed, which are quite different across the industry, and the contribution that this exercise will make towards a climate risk assessment maturity.